The test was simple. Power the station. No fusion. No solar. No fuel. No help. 72 hours. 1 asteroid lab. 0 sympathy. The Galactic Academy's most prestigious exam, the self-sufficiency trial. Top students from 39 species arrived on shuttle docks with portable AI cubes, crystalline capacitors, miniaturized warp matrices, and egos large enough to generate gravity. The human arrived with a backpack, a wrench, and chewing gum. His name was Eli Grayson. He was from Earth. He said very little, mostly nodded, watched. The others noticed him immediately, not because he was loud, because he wasn't doing anything complicated. The station was cold. No lights, no climate, no gravity assist, no oxygen cycling. Just bulkheads, vents, sealed batteries that didn't work. Most teams went for theoretical solutions. The Valari attempted antimatter lattice induction. The Okavi tried dark matter harvesting from the asteroid's crust. The Nixians built a crystal resonance cage, powered by entangled quark pairs. And Eli, he took an empty corridor, bolted down scrap piping, salvaged a spindle from a ventilation fan, and welded it to a manual treadmill. The Tlaxer students, all photosynthetic intellects from the Omran spiral, floated over to watch. Primitive human. You expect foot motion to generate station-scale wattage. Eli shrugged. No, I expect this to power 1 flywheel. That'll store mechanical energy. Then I gear up into an old-school turbine that feeds a rectifier coil I'm winding now. He paused, looked up, and grinned. Also, I didn't say I'd be walking. 2 hours later, his alien partner, Dramo, a 6-legged Valari with hooves like piston heads, was awkwardly strapped to the treadmill. What is this contraption? It's cardio, Eli muttered, tightening a copper coil. While others argued over quark balance and zero-point theory, Eli adjusted a basic gear assembly, wound by repurposed ducting and tension rods. It creaked, groaned, spun. Then the flywheel began to glow faintly red from heat friction. Eli pressed his hand to a pipe. Warmth. Good enough. By hour 14, Team Valari's rig exploded in a haze of negative mass leakage. Team Okavi flooded their lab with time-displaced feedback. One of them vanished. The others stopped speaking. Team Nixians accidentally converted part of their power array into a rotating gravity bubble that crushed their monitoring terminal. And Eli, he made tea. Boiled water with a copper heating coil wrapped around a soup can, powered by a flywheel charged by 30 minutes of alien jogging. He offered the tea to a floating Tari observer drone. It beeped confused. He patted it. Don't worry. This'll make sense soon. By hour 28, Eli's station had lights in 3 rooms, 1 water pipe flowing, 1 small oxygen cycler running, and ambient heat. Not much, but sustainable. The alien professors watched through remote feeds. Most assumed the human setup was a joke, a lesson in failure, a demonstration in futility, a metaphor for species that hadn't evolved past manual labor. But one instructor, old, silent, one I replaced with analog optics, leaned closer to the monitor and whispered, "They're not trying to win, they're trying to work." At hour 40, Eli's tread assembly was wrapped in insulation foam. He added a second Valari on the treadmill. Double output, double storage. He hooked up an old capacitor rack, repurposed from emergency defibrillators. It glowed, charged, didn't overheat. His light stayed on. The others noticed. One Nixian came by, faceplate flickering. "Human, this is madness." Eli just pointed to the working water dispenser, then to the hot plate, then to the growing charred graph in his scavenged terminal. "Madness," he said, "is rely on energy sources you can't fix with a wrench." By hour 59, Team Tlax's rest station was dark. Their bio-solar reactors failed to adjust to indoor lighting. The Shield team argued over who corrupted the code for their temporal capacitor. It had melted into slag. And Eli, he wired the hallway lights. All of them. Then strapped himself into the treadmill beside Dramo and jogged for 20 minutes. When the lights came on across the entire corridor, the station's automated status panel blinked, then chimed. Subsystems nominal. Energy reserve restored. Core functionality reactivated. The alien observers blinked. That's not possible. But it was, because while they tried to reinvent physics, the human remembered something older, more stubborn. Movement. Hour 60. The trial was almost over. Only 3 teams had systems still online. 2 of those were running at 14% or less capacity. 1 station was fully operational, and that station had a treadmill bolted to the floor. Eli wasn't even sweating anymore. Drama was. The 6-legged Valari clomped rhythmically, each step charging the weighted flywheel with precise torque. The copper wiring hummed faintly with load cycling. The capacitor array, stacked from salvaged life support units, was full, too full. So Eli built a dump loop, a resistance coil bath. It glowed gently red to bleed off surplus energy. His station was producing more power than it needed from walking. The examination committee called an emergency session. They didn't understand it. Eli's design used no rare materials, no external power source, no advanced AI, no dimensional trickery, just torque, storage, discipline. Professor GLA Reen, from the Spiral Thought species I-11, stared at the logs. This is mechanical, analog, wastefully simple. The Terran liaison coughed lightly. Respectfully, Professor, nothing is wasted if it works. In Dock Chamber 2, Eli ran a diagnostics loop on the oxygen cycler. One of the Xiel students wandered in. He looked like he hadn't slept in a day. Your flywheel, it's inefficient. You're burning energy and friction loss. Eli nodded. Yup. Your resistive load coil bleeds 12% of your reserve into heat. Eli took a sip of hot tea. Correct. You're using walking as the base cycle? Eli smiled. Would you prefer your station to not work? The Xiel didn't reply. Meanwhile, Team Valari attempted to brute force their reactor back online by repurposing a quantum sync drive. The explosion took out half their lab and briefly destabilized the asteroid's internal magnetic field. It also knocked out 3 nearby surveillance drones. Eli's station didn't flicker. By hour 65, the judges made their rounds. They arrived at Eli's door. It slid open automatically. Smooth, quiet, warm. Light spilled into the corridor. The lead examiner, a 6-eyed Tyverian, stepped in. He sniffed the air. Temperature regulated. Air breathable. Lights stable. Heat signature consistent. Eli nodded. System's been running for 40 hours straight. The examiner gestured at the treadmill. You walk. Yup, me and Dramo. The Tyverian squinted. Why? Eli stepped toward the flywheel casing and patted it. Because motion is free, and motion stores energy. Simple as that. The judges were shown the circuit logs. All analog. No quantum processing. Just pressure plates, crankshafts, and wiring that any 20th century Terran engineer could have reverse engineered. The entire station's backbone was built from discarded tech and muscle, and yet it worked longer, steadier, and more cleanly than every other entry. Why didn't you attempt something modern? One of the judges asked. Eli paused, then pointed at a half-burnt crystal housing unit in the corner, salvaged from a failed Nixian build. They all tried to solve a test. I tried to survive it. The treadmill generator wasn't elegant, but it never overloaded, never failed, never needed recalibration. It just asked for one thing. Keep going. Hour 70. All other teams had shut down, some out of failure, some out of protest. Human gimmicks, they muttered. Physical exertion? Barbaric. But none could explain how the human station had hot water, warm food, working comms, and enough spare energy to power an auxiliary drone. The final evaluation began. Teams presented their failures. Many had ambitious theories. None had results. Then came Eli. He wheeled in the treadmill. Dramo stood on it proudly. One judge tilted his head. You're bringing your mechanism in? Eli grinned. It's mobile, Want a demo? They let drama walk. 30 seconds in, a bulb lit. Another 30, a fan spun. At 2 minutes, a kettle hissed and began to boil. The room fell quiet. Then Eli handed the judges a blueprint. 1 page. Crumpled. The system had a name at the top. Biomechanical Analog Microgrid BM System. Underneath, 1 note handwritten. You don't need complexity when you have commitment. Eat grace and earth. The exam ended at hour 72. The top score wasn't just given. It was unanimous. For the first time in Academy history, the final project wasn't stored in archives. It was replicated. In emergencies, colonies across fringe worlds adopted the design. Treadmill, flywheel, heat coil, charge dump, no fuel, no AI, just sweat, and the belief that sometimes the simplest system was the strongest. The galaxy gave it a new name, the human loop. They meant it as a joke. But every time a power cell failed in deep space and someone stepped on a crank pedal, they remembered the human didn't try to impress the galaxy. He just made it work. The human loop spread faster than anyone expected. Within weeks of Eli's exam victory, over a dozen outposts across the outer band requested blueprints. They weren't asking for sleek fusion cores. They wanted treadmills. At first, the elites mocked it. The inner core academies called it a regression. One Nixian publication dubbed it archaic barbarism. An Okavi analyst claimed the trend would collapse under galactic pressure toward refinement. They were wrong, because colonies didn't want elegance. They wanted something that worked when everything else didn't. The first real field test came unexpectedly. A freighter from the Canary sector lost all reactor containment mid-transit. Backup AI failed. Emergency power, dead. Distress beacons wouldn't reach help for 5 hours. Crew, 7. Fuel, 0. Hope, none. 1 Terran engineer on board. She walked into the cargo bay, bolted down storage crates, tied a braided cable to the main junction bus, and told the Canary pilot, start walking. The tread-powered flywheel gave them 26% baseline power, enough to reroute life support, maintain core stability, and send a short burst emergency ping. They were rescued before hour 6. By then, the engineer had logged 17.2 kilometers and powered 4 life support cycles. She slept for a day. The loop survived atmospheric reentry. It made the front page of 200 systems. Terran technology, caveman fixes future. The headline was meant as a joke. It wasn't received as one. Back at the academy, Eli was gone. He'd returned to Earth. Left no forwarding address. But his file was marked exemplary, legacy grade. Students began quietly studying his project. Old floor fans started disappearing from dorms. Copper wiring grew scarce. A new course module was added to Engineering 101. Human redundancy systems, applied simplicity. Still, not everyone was impressed. The Galactic Technology Guild met in secret. Their markets thrived on dependence, on complexity. They didn't like the idea of machines people could build in a shed. They commissioned a report. Projected economic threat, high. Disruption factor, unacceptable. Recommended action, discredit, suppress, replace. So they launched a smear campaign. First came the fitness cult accusation. Then falsified reports that a treadmill generator had electrocuted an alien child. Then claims that Terran muscle-based tech encouraged labor exploitation. The campaign almost worked, until a real disaster struck. A solar flare disabled the orbital grid of Gelos 5. No solar power. Fusion dampened. Grid blown. 30,000 colonists stranded. Temperatures plummeting. AI offline. Death toll expected in hours. Then someone remembered. There's a human loop in the agricultural center. It was dusty, untested, built from leftover tools and cranks. But it worked. 10 volunteers stepped up. They took turns walking, jogging, pushing crank pedals. 1 footstep at a time, they powered medical systems, heat vents, water pumps, Communication beacons. They walked for 37 hours straight, rotating in shifts. By the time supply ships arrived, not a single colonist had died. The smear campaign collapsed overnight. The Guild issued a clarification, rebranded the loop as a Terran kinetic redundancy grid, tried to claim they had always supported it. They hadn't, but the colonies no longer cared. They had power. The design went viral again, this time not in labs, but in homes, on ships, in backpacks, portable generators, child-sized crank kits. Some units looked like gym equipment. Others were artfully built into furniture. They didn't just survive blackouts. They replaced backup cores entirely. People started walking for power on purpose. Fitness groups logged mileage as kilowatt hours. Kids competed to charge emergency batteries for schools. One Terran settlement built a literal power park. Treadmills and bikes linked to the grid. Every step keeps the lights on. And through it all, no one could find Eli Grayson. Some said he returned to Earth and vanished. Others claimed he was building a next-gen loop, one that needed no human input at all. A myth formed. He walked still, somewhere, charging the stars. But one thing was certain. He had changed the galaxy, not with complexity, with effort, not with machines no one could fix, with machines no one needed help fixing. And buried beneath the awe, the laughter, the trends, was the uncomfortable truth. Humanity didn't build for beauty. They built for the worst-case scenario. And when that came, when systems failed, when fusion sputtered, when batteries melted, they didn't panic. They started walking. They summoned the Terrans to the High Forum. The Galactic core elites weren't angry. They were worried. Their systems were too delicate. Fusion grids failed under flares. Quantum networks blinked out under stray gravity waves. Entanglement-based logistics crumbled when the stars shifted. And now, everywhere they looked, people were building treadmills. The chairman of the Galactic Engineering Council spoke to the Terran delegation. "You've infected the colonies with your crudeness." The human envoy smiled politely. "We offer a solution that doesn't explode." In the back of the forum chamber, a loop-powered drone spun slowly, charged entirely by a Valari diplomat who had jogged 15 minutes that morning. Quiet, reliable, mocked by no one. The council issued a proposal. Ban human redundancy systems in core infrastructure. Call them non-standard. Too analog. Too backwards. Too Terran. The vote was scheduled. But it never happened, because the next day, the central spire lost power. A reactor cascade. Overload. Fail-safes jammed. Quantum buffers reversed polarity. The spiral feed relays melted. Core command lost light. Air, gravity, everything. The council gasped in darkness. Then a light. Dim at first. Yellow. Dirty. Then another. Flickering panels. Emergency heaters. Oxygen vents hissed. The room lit up in uneven pulses. Manual. Ugly. Working. Power routed through a single crate-sized flywheel in the basement, charged by 3 Terran engineers who had been on lunch break. One of them had sprinted to the basement when the alarm sounded. The others followed. They took turns on the loop and kept the core alive for 93 minutes until main systems rebooted. When the lights came back, the chairman stared across the table at the Terran delegation. No words, just a nod. The vote never came. The ban died before it reached the floor. Instead, a new protocol was issued. All core facilities must maintain one biomechanical backup grid. Terran loop systems strongly encouraged personnel to be trained in kinetic power cycling. It wasn't a trend anymore. It was policy, and not just policy. Philosophy. Because every time a blackout hit, every time the grid fell, every time stars flared or entropy chewed at tech, there was always one solution that didn't rely on hope or theory or perfection. It relied on movement, on effort, on humans doing what humans always did, walking forward. Colonies began designing cities around kinetic loops. Schools had walk-to-charge recess. Shuttles included emergency treadmill pods. Orbital rings added kinetic towers. spinning with every footstep. A Galari city elected its first Terran mayor, who powered her inauguration lights by walking on stage. Eli Grayson's name returned, no longer faceless. He didn't give interviews, didn't sell patents. He just released every loop schematic as public domain. When someone asked why in a rare radio transmission, he said only because the future breaks. We don't. A final note from the Academy archives. Human technology is not made to dominate. It is made to persist. When the batteries die and the lights fail and the void takes everything polished and perfect, they will still walk. And with each step, the stars will stay lit.